So I had a friend where they could not get a job, or it seemed like they could not get a job at their current location. They were doing everything that they could possibly do. And it wasn't until they moved to a different city in a different state, and it just so happened to be closer to a Mars IC line. Suddenly, all of this work that they had been putting in and building towards finally paid off. And it was a remote job, aka working from home, which is something that Mars IC or Mars on the IC could literally represent. So, this Mars IC played out literal in the sense that my friend was able to secure some work. And luckily, shortly after they secured that job or that dream position, they moved again. So otherwise, they may have become a workaholic. Now, what is this? This is astrocartography. And if you think that's a coincidence, let me tell you about my other friend. They travel to Asia about once or twice a year, and every time they come back to the US, they feel this sense of disorientation or just overall, like, what am I doing with my life kind of energy. I'm just ready to shake things up. I realize now that I've been in a rut, and obviously, traveling will do that, right? But they are more so an extensive traveler, like, they'll stay there for months at a time. And I just notice whenever they come back, they're rethinking their entire structure of their lives. And one of the reasons this is the case is because where they go in Asia, there is a Uranus IC line. This is astrocartography. Your birth chart changes based on the relocated chart. What do I mean? Well, if you were born in New York at 9 a.m., 9 times out of 10, if you were born at the same time on the same day in Tokyo, based on time zone differences and just where you are in the world, your chart would look completely different, almost opposite. And that is because the sun may have been rising in New York, but setting in Tokyo. Thus, your chart changes based on this relocation. And thus, we have different experiences and different potentials in these locations. Basically, you get kind of like a new or secondary birth chart called a relocated chart, where you are now working with those potentials as the planets stay in the same signs, but they move houses. So different parts of your life are now activated in these places. This is astrocartography or relocation. It's a sector of relocation astrology. All right, friends, if you are new here, my name is Faith and I'm an astrologer. I specifically specialize in astrocartography as well as money readings. Welcome. So in this video, I want to talk about what astrocartography is, the components of an astrocartography map, as well as give you some resources to begin working with your own astrocartography map. So let's get into it. So I just explained a little bit about what astrocartography is. Again, if you were born in New York, your chart at the same day and the same time will look completely different if you were born in Tokyo. Now, this is just talking about the natal chart versus the relocated chart. But what you'll see all over the internet when you search astrocartography, you'll see a map. And so the astrocartography map is actually just a visual representation of your relocated charts. Basically, it took the information of when you were born and the trajectory of the planets, and then it printed that all across the globe. So it printed the trajectories of the planets all across the globe. Your astrocartography map is specific to the date you were born as well as the exact time that you were born. Okay, so let's get into what an astrocartography map looks like. It looks like a world map with colorful lines running across, and these lines represent different planetary bodies from your birth chart, and these lines give you more details as in what you may feel or what you may experience when you go to these physical places around the globe. So at the moment that you were born, each planet occupied a specific position in the sky. Maybe it was rising, maybe it was setting, maybe it was at its highest point, or maybe it was at its lowest point. The map, the lines on the map are showing you that trajectory. Thus, you have 4 lines per planetary body. And this is based on the 4 angles in the birth chart. So the 4 angles in the birth chart are the ascendant or rising, that is your rising sign. So you're probably most familiar with that one. Then you have the IC or the nadir. That's the lowest point of the birth chart. Then you have the descendant, which is closest to the 7th house, and that's related to your relationships. And then backtracking a little bit, the IC is related to the 3rd or 4th house. So it's like your home, your inner foundation, community, etc. And then you have the MC, which is the highest point of the chart. And if you have looked into any like money, business, astrology, you're probably heard of the MC. So this is related to career, legacy, social standing, business, etc., etc. So based on this, you generally will have 44 lines, so 4 per planetary body. And this just goes from, well, we'll get into the planetary bodies. So for example, when you hear things like Mars, the Mars IC line, that just means Mars was on the IC angle, thus creating that Mars IC line within that location. Okay, so Mars would be related to home, your inner world, your emotions, your local community, your parents, your family, elders, ancestry, etc., etc., being on that angle. And shameless plug here, if you're looking for someone to decode all of these layers, if you're with me and you're like, yeah, that makes sense, or if you are, especially if you're not with me and you're like, girl, what are you talking about? Feel free to book a reading. I'd love to walk you through everything. It's not as bad as you think. I promise. And also, if you're not at the point where you're ready for a reading, as you listen to this video, go ahead and check the description link. I have a free astrocartography guide that walks you through the basics of all the lines that I'm about to discuss, and it'll also have instructions on how to generate your astrocartography map, but more on that later. Okay, now let's talk about all of the planetary lines. Now, this is just going to be a foundational description. I'll actually do a deep dive video for each type of line, and it's already in an astrocartography playlist, so check that out. Make sure you subscribe, and then just kind of go in on whichever line you need more information on. And if it's not currently there, just know that I am actively adding more and more videos to this playlist. So starting with sun lines. Sun lines represent your vitality, your life force, your core identity. It's also very hard to hide from other people as well as from yourself. So easy visibility here, easily being able to be seen, but also you want to avoid secrecy on sun lines because again, you just kind of stand out naturally even when you're not trying, and you also cannot avoid yourself. So authenticity is a big key. Now, some cons to sun lines would be ego struggles, power tripping, perfectionism, or just feeling like you always have to perform. Next would be moon lines. So moon lines, this is heightened intuition. This is emotional fulfillment, deep, strong connection to your family or ancestry here. Just overall feeling a sense of nurturing. But some cons would be mood swings or just taking things very, very personally, or just overall wearing your heart on your sleeve. Moving on to Mercury lines. Mercury lines are great for communication, broadcasting, networking, sales, marketing, branding, any type of investing or writing, teaching, etc., etc. The con would also be, or the downside to Mercury lines would be, your mind is very overstimulated or very active, and if you don't do things to give yourself some mental stimulation or work your brain, you may experience anxiety, culture shock, this sense of I know everything, kind of this brainy, know-it-all, high IQ, you can't tell me anything, I'm a genius energy. Think like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. And a fan favorite would actually be Venus lines. So Venus lines, obviously you're going to have beauty, attraction, abundance. You are going to be easily magnetic here, or just there's a pull about you, right? But the downside would be laziness, overindulgence, or just avoiding the hard tasks, or avoiding difficult conversations, lack of boundaries, etc., etc. I always recommend checking your aspects for every line, but especially the Venus and Jupiter lines, because people tend to automatically assume that these are going to be lovely, lucky, abundance, money making lines, and that's not necessarily the case for every person. All right, next would be Mars lines. So Mars lines are like your espresso shots. They are work, work, work. Mars is your brute life force, vitality, raw sexual energy kind of thing. So all of this is related, right? I especially always recommend a Mars line if you are in the fitness industry or maybe even wellness, because it is getting you moving, it is getting you active, it is action, it is work. Thus, you kind of already saw that in my story about my friend from earlier. Now, the downside to Mars lines would be too much work, too much aggression. So you're becoming a workaholic, like I mentioned before, or you just come off very aggressively to other people. So watch how you communicate. Stay in tune with your emotions. You definitely need to regulate on Mars lines, especially not any Mars lines. Just make sure that you are regulating and really kind of checking in with yourself and getting some of that excessive energy out. Okay, next let's talk about Jupiter lines. So this is another fan favorite. But again, aspects are very, very important, as well as planetary dignity. But that's a conversation for another day. So Jupiter lines represent abundance, luck, expansion, growth, philosophy, teaching, law. So they are great lines to go have a good time, have new experiences, create new opportunities for yourself, meet new people, and obviously expand in different financial or just overall opportunity type of ways. However, too much of anything is not good for you. So you can expand too much, or there's a sense of overgrowth. You may overcompensate or just overcalculate and kind of think you are larger than the situation or better than someone. So keep all of those things in mind. You can also expand in a way that you may not be expecting, whether that's gaining weight or maybe even getting pregnant or something like that. So keep all of that in mind. The next type of lines would be Saturn lines. So Saturn lines are work, 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 work. They are structure, they are discipline, they are karma. They are time. So you may experience a lot of delays even while you are visiting a Saturn line, but definitely if you relocate to a Saturn line, Saturn lines can also feel socially isolating. While you do gain a lot of discipline and wisdom through, just work and putting in that time. The downside is it does feel isolating sometimes. Sometimes it can feel very restrictive there, and just overall like I'm just alone and kind of doing my own thing, and it's like growing pains or like maturing, like I'm not a kid anymore kind of thing. But these are great lines for productivity, and especially if you are wanting to get something done or you are planning something to where you're kind of playing the long game. The next lines after Saturn lines would be Uranus lines. So Uranus lines are great for shaking things up, getting yourself out of a rut, feeling authentic, and just overall tapping into your uniqueness and your quirkiness. However, Uranus is the planet of surprises. It's the planet of sudden changes, sudden movement, sudden explosions, figuratively and literally. So it's very, very hard to create structure or stability here. So it's great for like vacation spots, but living here permanently, it can be very, very challenging. After Uranus, we have Neptune. So with Neptune lines, these lines can feel very fantastical. They can feel very mysterious, very ethereal. Neptune rules film, it rules illusions, dreams, it rules altered states. So think like drugs, pharmaceuticals, alcoholism, etc., as well as artistry. So Neptune lines are great for any type of world building, whether you're writing a book, whether you're, writing a play or creating the storyline for a movie or filming the movie, or just even down to, you are just getting lost in the spiritual realm or whatever the case may be. So it's great for exploring spiritual pursuits and kind of tapping into your higher self or a better version of you. However, it can get very, very foggy. And if you are someone who has a lot of drive and you have this 8-month plan, 5-month plan, 5-year plan, whatever the case may be, this line is going to feel very frustrating for you because it's easily you can easily get disoriented along these lines or just overall lose your sense of identity here. So keep that in mind. After Neptune, we have Pluto. So Pluto is this deep transformation. It's the transformation where it's more so in your face. So this is death, this is rebirth. These lines could be great for obviously transmuting any type of negative energy. Negative energy may come up, or just more challenging situations may come up. Physical danger can manifest along Pluto lines, and I did mention it with Mars lines as well. Physical danger can manifest also, but just overall, the idea of power and whether that's you tapping into your own personal power or power struggles can come up. So be mindful here. So you will see, where you can come into power, but you also will see what is your dynamic or relationship to power itself along these lines. So keep all of this in mind. These lines are great for shadow work or any type of past life regression or anything like that. But it is like you are descending into the underworld, and you'll have to face some form of your shadow. The last two that I'll talk about is Chiron and the North Node lines. So with Chiron lines, same thing. Sometimes physical danger can manifest along Chiron lines. I don't see it as often as Mars and Pluto, but it is possible. I've seen it in a few readings. But in general, Chiron in astrology represents the wounded healer. So it's some type of lifelong wound that we carry. Normally our Chiron placement will give us insight into that. And so under this energy, you will face some type of trauma, some type of healing. Again, it could be physically, it could be more mentally or psychologically. And also you may be called to be a healer or a teacher or a mentor, or you may look for a mentor. So some type of transmutation normally happens along Chiron lines. They're also great for retreats and, plant medicine, and again, mentorship, teaching, anything like that. Chiron lines are good for. The last one will be the North Node lines. So in general, in astrology, the North Node lines represent the lessons or fate that you're moving towards in this lifetime, versus your South Node is what you learned, lessons that you learned in your previous lifetime. So under the North Node lines, things can feel very emotional. It's definitely a hyper focus on growth, whether you realize it or not. And you may encounter a lot of fated connections or fated experiences, synchronicities, things like that. So keep all of these things in mind under North Node lines. All right, I know that was a lot. That was a lot of information, but I want to slow down a bit and highlight two things. And these can make or break someone's experience when they start going to their astrocartography lines, or purposely, intentionally interacting with their astrocartography lines. Number one is aspects, and I've mentioned this throughout. So aspects are very, very important. If you have a specific aspect, especially a challenging aspect in your chart, that still applies when you go to these locations. So if you have, for example, the sun opposing Pluto, that energy is still going to present itself in a new location. Your sun and Pluto may relocate to a new house within your relocated chart, but that energy still applies. There still will be pressure there between those two planets, and that will then flavor your experience under some of these lines. So if you expect your sun's lines to be light and airy, there could be a sense of transformation, rebirth, death, etc., under your sun lines. So keep that in mind. The second thing is timing. So just like with a regular natal chart or secondary chart, you have you can do the biwheel for timing. We have something called cyclocartography in astrocartography. Now, cyclocartography, the technique was created by Jim Lewis, and this is the same astrologer that popularized the term astrocartography itself in the 70s. He did not create astrocartography, or astromapping is what it really is. He didn't create this technique, but he did popularize the term itself. Okay, so with cyclocartography, we're using a map overlay. So in professional software, you can animate the chart, and we're using a map overlay to show transits and progression. So there are two different lines, and those lines then animate and go by the land on the chart. So for example, if you're visiting a Venus descendant line, but you may have a Saturn line go by, a Saturn transit line go by, then that completely changes how that Venus line plays out for you, because from a timing perspective, now we are adding in that extra layer of Saturn. And same thing, if you have a progressed Mars go by, that Venus line might feel a little bit more spicier than it normally does with Mars, the Mars progressed line going by. I hope this is making sense. And if it's not, that's okay. That is why I have personal readings. So you can book a personal reading with me, especially if you've already had an introductory astrocartography reading with me. I usually require those before going into timing, just so we're all on the same page. But there we can get very, very specific, and I can help you navigate your map, the overall interpretation, or if you'd like to go into timing, we can do that as well. All right, now that you have a better understanding of the different planetary lines, I quickly want to highlight the fact that you also have two more things on the map itself. Well, you have a lot of things, but a couple of main things you would be something called parans, and that is when two planetary lines kind of create an X and cross. At that X point, you have a horizontal line that spans out, and those are called parans. So normally within that area of that horizontal line, you can feel it from up to 75 miles going north and 75 miles going south. And during this area, or around this area, you will feel the combined energy of both of those planetary lines, right? So if you have a Jupiter line going this way, but then maybe you have a moon line going that way and they cross, that would span out as a Jupiter moon paran. And so the energy of the paran will be a combination of both of those planets. Normally you have to have professional software to see this, but I believe there are a few free sites where you can see your parans as well. The second thing that I would like to highlight would be your aspect lines. So your aspect lines are showing you how the planets are interacting, and they are creating a line within that location. And that just gives you a little bit more flavor or insight as to what is going on for different locations. And a lot of times you may not have a planetary line or astrocartography line, but you could have an aspect line in that area that is also giving you a different story for that location. Now, let's talk about what if you don't plan on traveling, right? Or what if you don't plan on relocating because you like where you live? Then there are still options for you to interact with your locational astrology. The other layer that you can always add, or that is normally on an astrocartography map, a lot of astrologers will combine this technique with astrocartography maps, is local space. So local space is a locational astrology technique where you kind of become the compass. It is showing planetary lines based off of something called the azimuth or the horizon. So usually when you look at a local space map, it'll have a little pin. It'll normally start off at the city where you are born, but then you can relocate that pin to whichever city you are currently residing in or visiting. And then from there, within the map gets really, really like specific. You can go break it down to the neighborhood or just, your local area, and you can figure out what lines you want to interact with. For example, I often teach along my Pluto local space line. So that's me tapping into my personal power, creating a lot of transformation for my clients or my students, etc., etc. I often like to go to a lot of coffee shops and write or work on content and emails along my Mercury local space line, tapping into that communication, that broadcasting, that networking, that sales, etc., etc. So this is something that you can use in your local community now. And even in parts of Eastern Europe, people actually combine this with feng shui and kind of apply this type of locational astrology to their home and their decor and things like that. So I think that's really, really cool. The second thing that you could use now would be what's called remote activation. And this is something that I believe got really popular with Jim Lewis as well, where it's like we are tapping into the location of that place. So for example, but we're not actually there, right? So for example, if you have a Jupiter MC line going through Thailand, for example, then you can go out and eat Thai food. You can try to learn the language. You can interact with someone who is from Thailand. You could watch vlogs, documentaries, movies, shows from Thailand, and you are remotely activating that Jupiter MC line. Or you can actually pull up your map, screenshot your map, save it as an image or your background, whatever the case may be, and look at that physical line on that map and figure out visual ways to interact with it, whether you're plucking it, whether you're walking along it, whether you're using it like a pool noodle in the middle of the ocean, anything like that that you can think of to interact mentally with that line. That is also another form of remote activation. So these are two ways that you can use astrocartography as more of a practical tool and without you even leaving your home. All right, I know this was a lot of information, but before we wrap up this video, I did want to take the time to give you all some free resources. Now that you understand more about your astrocartography map and what's on it, let's talk about how to pull it up, and I'll give you a few resources to work with your map. So number one, like I mentioned before, I have a free astrocartography guide that you can download, and it'll give you the basic breakdown like I just gave you in this video, as well as instructions on how to generate your astrocartography map using the maps feature on my website. Which leads me to the second resource, that would be my maps feature on my website. So with this, you can go to www.faithgraceinspires.com, and in the menu, either at the top if you're on desktop or on the side if you're on mobile, you can go to the maps section, and there you're able to enter your information and pull up your astrocartography map. Now, several things that are pretty cool about this feature, but two main things are, number one, if you ever forget what did she say the sun line does, or what is a Neptune line again, you can actually click on the line using this feature, and within the legend, either on the side if you're on desktop or at the bottom if you're on mobile, it'll have a section where it'll populate a click here link for the corresponding blog for that type of line. So for example, the Neptune lines, it'll go to the Neptune lines blog, and there you can read all about what these different lines mean. And those breakdowns actually include angle by angle, and they'll have the YouTube video hyperlinked as well. So you can hang out with me once again here on YouTube. And the second cool thing about this feature is it's actually a web app. So if you're on your phone and you wanted to save this map, this maps feature as an app, you can do that, and it'll just be on your home screen. And anytime you want to pull up your astrocartography map, you just enter your information once again, and it'll pull right up. No account needed, okay? But I should have a tutorial on YouTube coming up soon, so I can walk you through all of that in another video. Now, the next free resource, I kind of already gave it away, would be my blog. So I have several posts all about astrocartography, whether that's line breakdowns, whether that's how to use it for business. I even have some stuff about how to use it if you're an Airbnb host on there, etc., etc., and a few celebrity case studies. That'll give you more information on how to, again, interpret some of these lines and get more familiar with your map. Now, if you want a more done for you approach, then of course I do have my personal readings. If you've never worked with me before, I require you to first have an intro astrocartography reading, and then from there we'll work on timing or any type of follow-up, so we're all on the same page. So I will link that in the description below, where you can work with me. But if you prefer a more DIY approach, two options. First, I have what's called my Astrocartography Simplified Handbook or ebook, where it's pretty much everything that I talked about, but a little bit more in depth per planetary line. This is more of a cookbook style, so you will have to have a basic understanding of astrology, but this is a nice tool for you to use if you plan on interpreting your map on your own. And then the second option is I have my Foundations of Astro Mapping course. It's a self-paced course where I walk you through how to read your astrocartography map for yourself. And there's even a bonus section where I teach you how to read the map or how to create a map for you and someone else, like your partner or your mom or whatever the case may be. So check that out if you're more of a DIY girly. All right, if you've made it this far in the video, first of all, give yourself a round of applause, pat on the back. I am proud of you and thank you for hanging in there with me. I know this was a lot of information, but in general or overall, astrocartography is really a great practical tool to use in your everyday life, and especially if you are a travel lover such as myself. Now, take this information, let it simmer, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comment, or again, feel free to connect with me and book a reading. If this video has piqued your interest about astrocartography, I highly recommend for you to check out the astrocartography playlist, where I will go more in depth per planetary body for each line. And until then, I'll see you in the next video.